Can you just start off by telling a bit about what you do now?
I am currently an executive recruiter in aerospace and defense, mostly, and that's about 60-70% of our business, and the other 40% is supply chain and logistics. And my background is in consumer packaged goods. I worked at Purina, General Mills, and Campbell's Soup.
Awesome. What are the most difficult aspects about your job?
The most difficult aspects about my job would be acquiring new customers. Executive recruiting is a very competitive business, and so it's up to me to go out and identify potential customers, to put together a plan to approach that customer and secure some business.
What did you struggle with when you first became a professional seller?
Just the whole concept of selling and developing a mindset of selling as a consultant and selling as a service to a valuable service to a customer, as opposed to the mindset of getting somebody to buy something.
In the aspect of selling as a career, what do you love most about your job?
Selling has always offered a lot of freedom and flexibility, and so as a salesperson, I typically had the opportunity to be out of an office quite a bit and at the customer's location. I had the opportunity to, and as a salesperson, again, going back to being a consultant as opposed to someone trying to get somebody to buy something. What really gets you there is being a student of the customer's business and really understanding their business, what their needs are, and bringing them solutions that create value for them. So what I like most was the flexibility, freedom, and creativity as part of being a salesperson.
How has the sales process changed since you first started to nowadays? Or has it really?
I don't think it's really changed. I think the sales process, well, I would say here's what's changed is that universally it has migrated more and more from a salesperson being a person trying to get somebody to buy something to a salesperson being there to solve problems and bring solutions to the customer. And we've seen, you see that a big example is car sales. And so with the advent of the internet and the transparency of pricing and cost, car dealerships had to go from, and obviously the car salesman, quote unquote, used car salesman, were kind of they got picked on as being the sort of pushy, maybe dishonest salesperson just trying to get somebody to buy something. And so we've seen that industry change significantly in terms of those folks becoming someone who has to bring a solution to a customer. And so we've also seen that further evolve across industries in terms of salespeople as everything has become more transparent. It's a matter of transparency and, again, bringing solutions to the customer. And I would add one more point is that, well, I mentioned the internet bringing transparency to the car buying process. So it's all about data and visibility to what's real and what's not, and bringing fact-based solutions to the client based on data, based on their needs.
Cool. What is your sales process in your current field compared to, or how does it differentiate from the traditional sales process? Fundamentally,
there are a couple of different structures in a sales process. One is being a salesperson who is the steward of existing customers, and so that was like General Mills and Campbell's, and so we already had certain customers, whether that was Walmart or someone else, and it was my job to keep them happy and to grow the business there. And then there are businesses where you don't have existing clients, and so then you have to go out and identify potential new clients and decide who you want as a customer, how you're going to approach that customer, and what solutions you're going to bring to that customer that'll create value for them.
Okay.
And so that's often referred to as a farmer type of sales role, which would be the Walmart customer teams in Northwest Arkansas, to a hunter sales role where you have to go out, find the clients, acquire the clients, get the business, and grow the business.
Does the culture of the company change the way you would go about selling?
Absolutely. So the first example that comes to mind is my experience in the consumer packaged goods business. And so coming from a sales role where I had responsibility for smaller grocery retailers and others, and I'll mention some names that may be familiar, some may not. So like a Publix, which is a chain in Florida. There's an old chain called Winn-Dixie that was across the South. There were just smaller retailers. And so the approach to them was often not only giving them a good deal on a product and showing them how they could make profit numbers that they like to see, percentage margin numbers they like to see, but also a lot of that selling was relationship based. And so we had programs where we could take customers to NASCAR driving schools, we could give customers tickets to sporting events, we could take them golfing, that sort of thing. So that was a combination of bringing solutions but also building relationships. And then when I got onto the Walmart business, it was a very different business model because Walmart has a very strict policy against their associates accepting anything from a supplier. And so it was all about the solution you could bring to their business. And so I couldn't take them to a NASCAR driving school or give them sporting event tickets. And the other thing, going back to the data-driven customer, Walmart had more information than I'd ever seen from a retailer. I think a lot of my previous customers didn't really know what their average profit margin was or what their inventory turnover was. They certainly didn't know what my own time and fill rate was in terms of deliveries to their distribution centers. And so coming on to the Walmart business, it really shifted to a total focus on bringing solutions to the customer, helping them grow their business, and it really changed from me being focused on the retailer as a customer to being focused on the consumer as a customer. And one of the things that Walmart buyers would tell salespeople is, "I'm not your customer," when we would call them the customer. And so the customer is the consumer, the person who ultimately buys and uses your product, and they wanted us to work together to bring solutions to the consumer as a customer, which I think is ultimately the right way to approach retailing.
How does the lifestyle of sales differ from that of a corporate career, other corporate careers such as, logistics, supply chain, product management, stuff like that?
Right. So again, in a lot of respects, there's a little more freedom in a sales role in terms of being out of the office and in front of the customer. And one of the sayings we had in one of the more successful sales teams I was on is whenever we get in front of the customer and we're well prepared, good things happen. And so you typically don't sell as much sitting in a cube or in your office as you do when you're in front of the customer. Then the other piece is going back to understanding the ultimate customer is the consumer of your product, whoever that might be. You also spend time in front of that ultimate consumer customer, which in terms of selling to retailers is working with your marketing department on consumer research and understanding that, and getting out into stores and seeing how stores are laid out, watching and talking to customers in the stores, and figuring out how to bring solutions to the person who ultimately consumes your product.
How can time management play a role and affect the daily life of a seller?
So much like being in college, being a salesperson gives you a lot of freedom of choice in terms of how you spend your time. And so free time is an illusion. And so if you think you have free time, you should be thinking about what's not getting done. And so time management is especially critical as a salesperson, because with freedom comes another level of responsibility and self-management. And so it's very beneficial to be very much aware of how you're spending your time, and not only in terms of being busy, but are you engaged in revenue and business growth activity. So it's easy to get caught up in a lot of busy work. It'd be easy to get immersed in understanding consumer behavior. But there's a point at which you have to say, okay, I've learned enough about that. Now it's time to go apply it to a sales opportunity and turn it into sales.
What role does job performance play in long-term job security or job security in general?
So that's an interesting question. So as a recruiter, one of the things I encourage candidates to discuss and ask questions about in interviews is what does the company's performance management process look like? And what are the expectations for the person in this role? And so if I'm interviewing for a job, I want to ask the hiring manager, the person I'm going to be reporting to, what is success going to look like in 6 months and 12 months and 24 months? And what will the successful candidate have accomplished at those in those time frames that will make them successful? And then also very important is what sort of feedback can I expect as I go forward in this job? So will I get feedback informally on a regular basis? What would that look like? What does the performance management process look like in terms of formal feedback? Will I have my first performance review in 6 months or in 12 months? And how is that structured? Is it a structured format that the report to that the manager and then the employee both input into, and then compare notes and talk about, and then how are goals set, and are there metrics behind those goals, hard numbers that you expect me to achieve, and will I have the tools to achieve those things? So the question again was,
what role does performance play in job security?
So the better the performance management process, and the better it's understood by the employee and the manager, then the more certain both parties will be that everything is getting done is what's expected is getting done, and that creates job security, is communication, understanding, and effective performance management. And
Cool. Do you think your sales experience, and if it does, how does it play a part in your everyday life? Not, pertaining to necessarily business.
Right. So in everyday life, so everybody's a salesperson. And so whether you're a kid negotiating with your parents on taking a trip or getting something you want, a new computer or whatever it may be, it's a lot of life is negotiation. So understanding the negotiation and sales process and how to influence people, and then also understanding that, again, successful sales long term is represents a win-win situation for both parties. So it's about both parties coming out of the discussion or negotiation with things that either benefit them or make them feel good or have basically a positive outcome.
Okay. How did you get your current position in the company?
So as I had spent many years in the consumer goods business, I wanted to do something a little differently, and I wanted to own my own business. And with the sales experience that I had and the opportunity to remain engaged in a sales type organization, recruiting business was just a good option for me in terms of transitioning from working for a big company to owning my own business.
What is the most difficult situation, whether it be in the current sales position you are in now or another sales position, that you've encountered during one of your jobs?
Repeat the question.
What's the most difficult situation you've encountered at your job? Or maybe like a recurring situation.
So maybe a couple of things. So part of the sales process and the business relationship process, one of the core must-haves is trust between all the parties involved in any business relationship. And so I've had situations where clients were not doing what they committed to do in the hiring process, and that could be that they try to change the job conditions or compensation or any number of things while we're in the middle of recruiting candidates. And so I present one thing to a candidate, and then the client decides, well, we're not going to pay that much, or the job's not going to be as big of a job, and they start taking things away, as opposed to, hey, this is a great candidate. We can pay more than we had thought we wanted to pay, because and I've had the positive side happen. I have had that happen too. Which is a great thing to happen. And then from a candidate standpoint, we've had situations where candidates have not been either haven't disclosed everything or have misrepresented something about their experience or their past. And as we get to the offer and acceptance phase of the employment process, something comes out that was not known before, and it puts the whole process at risk, and it potentially reflects negatively on us as recruiters if that candidate has not been forthcoming or not been totally honest with us. So the trust factor is key in any long-term business relationship, and as a recruiter, we like to develop long-term strategic relationships with both clients and candidates.
Cool. What would be just a couple key points of advice you would give to somebody who would want to go into sales?
That more and more, as I'd mentioned earlier, sales has evolved from the stereotypical person trying to get somebody to buy something to a consultant who's bringing solutions to the client. And so don't be intimidated by the any presumptions about sales in terms of any negativity attached to it, and that it is more and more it's becoming a data-driven process where you bring solutions to the person that you would like to be using your services or buying your product. And so it's number one, and never lose sight of from a sales perspective that really it's all about bringing a positive outcome to a need state that a consumer or a company or a person or an entity has, and you're bringing them solutions that are going to make their life better professionally and potentially personally as well. And then as you think about various options in terms of pursuing a career, keep in mind everybody is a salesperson. So even if you're, say you're an engineer, and ultimately that engineer has to design or develop or bring solutions to people. If you're a logistician, then you're looking to bring solutions to your client's distribution operation or transportation operation. And so I would say the key thing is that whatever whatever you do, keep in mind that success in business is all about communication and trust, and those things build relationships and confidence and productive relationships.
Cool. Do you think selling has improved your personal life, and how maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I've enjoyed a lot of freedom throughout my career by being in a sales role where I'm not in an office all the time. I do have the opportunity to be out, and then in a sales role, it's also given me the opportunity to interface with a lot of different functions within my client. And so as a salesperson, I've had the opportunity to interface with supply chain and logistics people and transportation people. When we've had opportunities to improve our service, I've had the opportunity to interface with IT people. That's part of the supply chain, a very key part of the supply chain and support. Also interface with IT people and data scientists in terms of analyzing consumer purchase patterns, consumer behavior. I've interfaced with marketing departments, both my own and my clients, again to understand the person or entity that's ultimately consuming your product and how to guide them to the right solutions. So it's, as a salesperson, I've had the opportunity to interface across just about every functional discipline within my own organization and or a client's organization. And then last, I would say another benefit has been that throughout my sales career, I've had the opportunity to, particularly having had responsibility for the Walmart business, I've had the opportunity to travel all over the country. I've been to like 40 states and several countries and 3 continents. And so the scope of a sales role, meaning how big is the customer and what's the geographical scope, may give you the opportunity to see a lot of places and meet a lot of people and have some interesting travel as well.
All right, final question. Was sales your first career choice?
Sort of, yes. So I just sort of gravitated towards sales. I think some people just do. It maybe I just found sales and marketing to be. I started out, actually, my major initially in college was psychology, so I was kind of interested in human behavior. And that sort of, but then as I got into psychology, that got a little too clinical for me. And so then I migrated to marketing, which is obviously related. They're both human behavior related. And so the, I guess yeah, I sort of picked the profession and it chose me as well. And it just had a lot of elements to it that were interesting to me. And all the things I've talked about in terms of, I've always been interested in having a very broad knowledge base, and there would be some subjects I would have interested in learning more deeply, but I've always had an interest in having a very broad knowledge base, and again, sales gives you the opportunity to interface with about every part of your company and your customer's company, and so that was a fit as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you.